Hey everyone, how's it going? Shuffle's back here with another video, and it is finally tier list time. So let's preface this with all the rules of the tier list. Primarily, before we get started, this is a late game tier list. It doesn't mean it's only RTA. It's not only PvP even, but it is late game. So if you're early game, you can use this as a guide as to what units you maybe want to hold on to or want to consider building later on. But a lot of the units that are really good early game that fall off late game are going to score poorly on this list. I will try and detail them as we go along. Also, uh, as promised, we did include some of the 3 stars on this list, which does mean the sacrifice in order to keep this under a couple hours long. Basically means I'm not going to cover all the lower units in detail. I will go over like just the people on the list at those levels. But the C and D ranks, I'm not going to detail where each individual unit can be used. If you want that kind of information, you can, I guess, come into the Discord and ask me privately, like where you think you could use so and so. But we're just going to skip over them in order to be able to add some of the 3 stars. So let's jump into the list. We're going to start with the water units here on the left. So we start with the question mark tier. You can see we only have 1 unit there. That's in nature, so we'll get to that later. Starting in the D tier for water, we have Zeno here on the far left. Then we have Zerato. He also in D tier, not really overly usable. Moving up into the C tier, we have Water Collie, Clarissa, and Crozet. Again, all these units are useful. Like you can use, for example, you can use all 3 of those in Wyvern. But that being said, this is a late game tier list, and anyone who is at this point, you don't really need those units. Like you've either got them or you have something better, or because you can, in terms of Wyvern, you can run Wyvern with almost anything. Um, it's assumed that you already have a Wyvern team at this point, so getting these units is not top priority at all. It doesn't mean they're not good and they're not useful, just means what I just said. Moving on up to the B tier, we will start with Says. I think in the B tier is where we're going to start talking about units, because as we move along to some of the other elements, you guys are going to have some questions. So let's start with Says. He does do big AoE damage. He can be used in cleaves. That being said, he doesn't get used much anymore, just because your gear that's that good, which you need to put on him to make him good, will be better used on someone else. Moving on, we have Ice Dom. Another unit can be a lot of fun. I've seen her used a little bit in RTA. You probably won't use her anywhere else. She does have damage reflection and a stun, but unless you're looking for one of those 2 things, you probably won't build her. Then we have Water Lulu. I'm still convinced Water Lulu could potentially be good in RTA. She does have a defense buff and a shield and a couple of defense breaks, including an AoE defense break. She just doesn't get a lot of play. Mainly, she's used in Wyvern and not much else. If you are looking for a Wyvern defense breaker, she's definitely right up there. But again, there's many of them, and no real reason to move her higher than this, just because she fills a role that's got many, many, many options. So if you have all those units as options, such as like Terraner guards and stuff like that, uh, there's really no reason to make her higher on the list just because of that. Speaking of units for Wyvern, we have Furious. He falls in the exact same category as the Litica. No reason to move him higher. Yeah, he's good at what he does in terms of being a Wyvern defense breaker. But as with the next unit on the list as well, in terms of Water Queen, all of those are basically just Wyvern defense breaks. If you need one, then they're spectacular and they're top tier. But for late game, they're nothing overly special other than that. Then we have Flan. I feel like maybe I should even move Flan lower on the list, but I did put her in B tier for now. She's still relatively new. Um, she got an AoE defense break plus a crit damage buff, which is a little strange. We've never seen crit damage buff in the game before, so new mechanic. And usually new mechanics are relatively bad. Usually because they don't want to release them overpowered. So maybe that's something that gets buffed in the future, because a lot of people were really looking forward to her, and already nobody's using her. Moving on, we will move up to the A tier. We have Blue Roman. Blue Roman is actually a really good strip. You don't see him used all that often because Broman is the more popular one, Light Roman. But he's still very good, very strong. His only downfall is that he's not element neutral. And with a lot of the element neutral strip set recently, people tend not to use him, and that's going to keep him at A tier. I think if he was element neutral, he would be higher on this list. Moving up, we have Angelica. Angelica, great early game unit, um, great mid game unit. She does fall off late game, which is why she's where she is. But she's so good early game, like to the point where she's overpowered early game, that I couldn't justify dropping her any lower than this. That being said, if you're really late game, then she's obviously lower, but you already know that, so you don't need me to tell you. Um, but she's crazy strong mid late game in terms of any PvE content. She's very, very good. Moving over one, we have Yuna, the Water Ranger. You get her for free. She does have a speed buff and attack bar boost. I do see her used a little bit in RTA, not necessarily for damage, but more as a booster, which is a lot of fun. That being said, she's kind of hard to use. She's not used often. No real reason to boost her any higher than this, but she's definitely usable in late game PvP if you really want to use her there. Next up, we have Luna. Luna did recently get an exclusive. Didn't really change much for her, unfortunately. She still does really big single target damage. She's a little better for Wyvern now that she could have a debuff on her skill 1. If you're looking for a damage dealer for Wyvern, you could definitely use her. With somebody did mention in one of my most recent videos that she is better now for RTA, and although that's true, I don't really see her having much of a place in like Legend to RTA or Legend to High Champion RTA. I'm sure you could make her work if you really wanted to, but honestly, I think your skill ups and your molas and your gear are better used elsewhere. Moving on, we have Water Chloe. Water Chloe, one of my favorite sound acting or voice acting in the game units, but she doesn't really get used all that much. I don't think she's great for Wyvern. Her nail is really interesting. It works really well in PvE, but then it doesn't really work in PvP, and she doesn't really have enough debuffs to be good enough for Wyvern, unless she's just your pure damage dealer. But then on the other side, she has one of the best burn multipliers in the game, which means she can do massive skill 3 damage if she burns into it. Um, she's a very confused little girl. She's not sure whether she wants to be PvE or PvP. I feel like she's one buff away from being kind of OP, though. So she falls in at the A tier. She can be used in any content, but she's not top tier in any either. Moving over one, we have Water Tywin. Water Tywin, the best AoE defense breaker in the game currently, because you can burn into him and then boost your other unit in behind him. Very strong in terms of that. Outside of a Bizarre Tywin cleave in Arena, though, he sees zero use. So, yes, he's really good for Bizarre Tywin cleave in Arena offense, but that's going to be about it. I don't know what else to say about him really. I don't know what they should do about him, but he's kind of in a rough spot right now. Unless that's really what you want him for. Moving on to Elena. I think what we're gonna do actually, we'll go across, we'll go back to the bottom for the next element after this, and we'll go S plus after this. Because these A tier units uh, are kind of at the point where they're very niche, and then moving up beyond A tier, we start to get into units that are more widely used. So Elena is the Water Soul Weaver. She's good again. Well, could have been good against Litica. The problem being that most CDOMs are so good and so fast now that they cut the Elena anyway, so it doesn't really matter. She just got a fantastic skin in the new Epic Pass, but unfortunately, she's not really used anywhere anymore. I was debating her moving her down on this list, but I want to give her another list before we move her down. I already moved her down to A, so we'll have to see what happens from there. But I'm a little sad because I love that skin and I will never be using it. All right, moving back to the bottom, we're going to start with the fire units. First off, we got Elfelt. Realistically, if you want damage relating about the same scale as Elfelt, you're probably going to use someone like Maid Chloe, because Maid Chloe probably does the same amount of damage, except you've got her on healer gear. Elfeld's damage output is terrible. It feels like it's bugged. It feels like they literally bugged the skill and then just never bothered fixing it because her damage is so weak. It's embarrassingly bad. Um, she needs something to be done with her. She could be lower than this, but she does have a defense break and an extra turn, so I decided to not move her down any lower. Up next, we have Kizuna. Kizuna is a cool early game unit, early game Soul Weaver, but late game, you're never going to use her. I'm not supposed to be even going through these. So Kwazu, she is not supposed to be there. Hold on. We're going to move her. I knew I forgot somebody when I started this, but we're not going to start recording it again. There we go. Haste, Fire Corvus, and Mercedes capping off the D tier. Moving up to C tier, we have Saul. Um, quick note on him every time somebody gives me a hard time about Saul. Yes, he can be good in Golem, but realistically, nobody farms Golem. Especially late game. If you're farming Golem, you are just wasting resources. Then we have Cirilla, we have Dingo, we got Era, and we have Cowrick. All units that see zero use in Legend plus or Champion plus RTA, and really no reason to build any of them for any content, unless you're just memeing or just looking to have a good time with a new unit that not many people use. Let me slot her in there, and we'll get to her in a minute. Moving on to Hazel. That's our first 3-star on the list. Hazel, Fire Soul Weaver. She is a specialty change unit, so you do have to put some work into her. But she can be relatively good in an all fire team. I don't see her used all that much. I never see her in RTA. But if you wanted to build like maybe Guild War offenses or potentially an arena offense built around something like her, she could work. She's also very good for some PvE. I heard people using her in Abyss as well. Then we have Researcher Carrot. Researcher Carrot is not one of my favorite units, but she can do some pretty crazy things in the right circumstances, but she's very niche. Then we have Fire Euphine, who is another unit that very niche. She's basically a Basar counter, and if you want to build her with really high attack for her burns against a Rylet, you could do that. Um, I think I really don't like that idea. I've seen a bunch of people try and do it, and I've never seen it work. I never even got her to level 50. I am not a fan of her. I would move her down, but there's so many people that swear by her that I basically got bullied into putting her at B rank. But I think she should probably be lower. Then we have regular Shuri. Regular Shuri is a king in PvE, Abyss, all that kind of stuff. But later on, you just don't really need him. He's just a speed imprint once you get late game, so I can't justify moving him any higher than this. That being said, I do sometimes use him as a speed imprint in RTA, so keep that in mind. But outside of speed imprint, he's probably not going to do much for you late game. Moving up to the A tier, we have newly placed Fire Maya. She did just get a big buff, and she does. She's a lot of stuns now. She can be a real stun bot if brought into the right team. I'm sure some people could argue she could maybe be higher on the list, but seeing who she's paired with here, I can't justify moving her any higher either. I think she's still very niche, but she's very good at what she does. Up next, we have Fire Cern. Fire Siren is another speed imprint, similar to Shuri, but she can actually do really good damage. If you've ever seen me do cleaves in RTA, I use her quite a bit. You can burn into her skill 2 in order to get an extra turn, and she can skill 2 into skill 3 kill an RB, or she can skill 2 into skill 3 kill, for example, like ML Rin and Assassin Sid, and able to get 2 kills on her turn. I've done that many times where someone will bring like 2 really fast units like Rin and Sid, and I've already got Oxlots, so I'll bring Cern, I will Oxlots boost into the Cern, and she can kill them both. Really nice speed imprint there. Other than that, I don't see her used all that often. I do really enjoy using her, but I can't really say she's better than an A rank because she is easily countered. But she does have a very niche use with her speed imprint, and since there's so many speed imprints in the game, that's going to give her rank all on her own. Then we have Fire Litica, another really niche unit. She's got an amazing kit for PvE. A lot of people use her in PvE all the way through Abyss and even in Raid and stuff like that. That being said, she's also good in PvP. She does have a strip and full attack bar reduction plus a slow. She can completely disable the enemy team's fastest unit. Plus, she's got an AoE skill 2 strip with a blind. She's got a lot going on. You could argue she could be higher on this list, but she's still fire, which makes it a little harder for her to use. Um, so she's going to stick in at A tier. I don't see her use much more than PvE, honestly. So that's where she's going to stay. Next up, we have Sirmia. Sirmia is a fire nuker, which is great for something like Golem. Outside of that, she doesn't really have much of a use. I've seen a few people try and use her in PvP. Outside of Guild War, she doesn't really get any play, although you do see her occasionally in Ox lots and regular lots arena teams. I know people use her that way. Honestly, I don't really like her damage enough to fill that role. If I was going to use something like that, I would probably just use Watcher Shuri, because at least then you get the speed imprint. But a lot of people like her, and even though she's quite niche, she can be a lot of fun to use. Up next, and finally for the A tier of the fire units, we have Melissa. Melissa's another one who very niche. She doesn't really do much. She doesn't really counter anything. She can do good damage, but she's a slow damage dealer. If you try and bring her in against Rylets, that could work. So you could use her in Guild War, because she will strip the evasion first. Unfortunately, in RTA, if it's just her by herself, the Rylet is usually going to outspeed her and just kill her anyway, so she'll never get a turn. So she doesn't really have any use in RTA. I've never seen anyone use her successfully in RTA. Guild War is another story. She does get some use there, and especially now with her buff, makes her a little bit better, so she moves up to that A rank. Moving on to the nature units. At the bottom here, you can see we have Morty. He did just come out about a few hours ago. I did summon him and am in the middle of building him, so we will be testing him tomorrow on stream. So make sure you stay tuned for that if you want to see that. If I had to take a guess as to where I would currently rank him, I will do that once we get up to that rank. Spoiler, he's not D rank. So we'll come back to Morty in a bit. First up in D rank, we have Cartusia. Then we have Purchase in C rank. Purchase used to be higher on this list. I dropped him down because he really only had a place in uh, occasional PvP. But with the new changes to um, Frenzy in RTA, I can't keep him up there any longer. He's got to move down now. He's HP based damage dealer. Yeah, he counters a lot, but there's a lot of units now that are anti-counter, and he's not nearly as good as he once was, because you're either going single target or you're going anti-counter. Moving up one, we go to Green Armin. Green Armin, great unit. If you're trying to stun bot, if you need a nature tank, you can use her. That being said, there are better nature tanks out there, so you don't really need to use her. You don't need to build her, but she can be a fun and niche unit if you want to. Then we have Silk. Silk is I think Silk could be really good. She has AoE speed buff and AoE speed down as a debuff. I think she could be used, but I've never seen anyone try it. So until then, she stays at B rank. Maybe someday I'll build up Green Silk and we'll give it a go. Then we have Ludwig. Ludwig suffers from the same problem that Says suffered from the water units, in that you have to give him really good gear for him to work, and he can work in special situations. That being said, if your gear is that good, you probably aren't putting it on Ludwig. You're probably putting it on somebody who will do more for you. So, although he can work, it's probably not recommended. Up next, we have Leo. Leo is basically just an AoE stun. He can be used. I don't see anyone really using him anywhere. I know a couple of these tier lists ago, I had him down in D rank, and I got a bunch of messages suggesting that I move him higher because they use him. So he will maintain his rank at B, but I still haven't seen anyone use him, and I definitely won't be moving him any higher on the list. I think he's probably higher than he should be. Up next, we have regular lots. So, like I mentioned, regular lots earlier when we talked about Sirmia. Um, He's a booster. He's basically a budget Oxlots. He does what Oxlots does, except he doesn't provide attack buff. Um, that can be fine with Sermia. With anyone else, he just basically turns into a regular Soul Weaver that helps your team cycle. That could be a lot of fun for things like PvE, but for late game and for PvP, you probably won't use him very often. Same thing with Rin. Rin is very, very niche. She used to get a lot more play than she does now, but she kind of fell off. The only place I really see her being used is Banshee, but that's about it. And now moving up to the A ranks, another 3-star on the list. We have Ruzid, specialty change Ruzid, of course. Great speed buffer. He has a speed buff. He has a boost. He can do a lot of things to enable some sort of a cleave. That being said, I think there are better cleave options out there. Most people will use an Oxlots, or they'll use Flitica, or even Cerise now. He's kind of fallen down the list in terms of that, but he does have a speed imprint. Unfortunately, he doesn't work on himself, but he does have a speed imprint, so keep that in mind as well. Then we have Herblin. Irvelin might get dropped on this list. He is at A. I do think he can be used in a very niche way, but I just think there's better units out there that do the same thing. He's still relatively new, so I hesitate to drop him down as people are still getting used to him. But next quarter, he could be down a rank on this list. Then we have Violet. Violet is probably right where he should be. He's a solid nature single target bruiser. Unfortunately, now we have all the same things that he provides in a dark version, and that kind of made him obsolete. I know a lot of people fed their Violets into Violet, myself included. He's still good though, and he could arguably be higher on this list. The problem is with single target elemental units, they're somewhat hard to use and relatively easy to counter. But you could, especially with all the anti-evasion stuff out now, you could still, however, bring him into RTA in the right situation. Then we have Pavel. Pavel is another unit that would be used in a cleave. He's another ranger. He does hugely boosted damage now. I think he could actually be quite good. That being said, I haven't used him since his buff. I was using him before his buff, but I think he's actually quite good. Very niche situation, though. Again, as with the rest of the units in A tier, very, very niche. Speaking of niche, we have regular Belena, a unit that so many people were so hyped about when she came out, and everybody built and was super excited about her and said she was OP, and then she fell off so quickly. She was in every PvP team even, but now with things that have evolved the way they have, she's kind of fallen off. I do think she might be usable again. It would be interesting to see if people could work her into their PvP teams again. I feel like maybe she could be usable in RTA now with the way the meta's shifted, but we'll have to see. Up next is Rowana. Rowana is somebody who's massively trending downward now. She was built to counter SSB, who's not used nearly as often as she was in terms of PvP. And to be completely honest, SSB counters Rowana anyway. So I would love to move her down further on the list, but I appreciate it when I see somebody draft her in RTA or have her on arena defense because it basically means they're playing one man down. Uh, I am very anti Rowana. I know some people would put her higher on this list, but I don't see any reason why. I've never seen her do outside of being paired with units like Tywin and ML Crow. If you're pairing with them, then she looks a lot better. But at that point, that's the only reason she stays on this high on the list. But then at that point, it's really she's just being carried by the other units. Like that's why she's winning. Um, but yeah, Rowana in at A tier. Biken up next, and very interesting damage dealer. Great for one-shot teams, which late game translates really well. That being said, you can use her in PvP, and she can help be that bridge unit between somebody like Cerise Sedom, and the rest of your damage dealers. She could kind of bridge the gap between speeds there if you want to use her like that. But still very situational. And then we have Moy, very good strip, and then an AoE stun as well. Unfortunately, she's nature unit, which makes her kind of hard to use because very easy to counter. Also, she's really only used in control teams, which are also really easy to counter. So she kind of suffers from the fact that even though she has a good kit, she's just so easy to counter in this current meta that she kind of takes a hit. That being said, maybe sometime in the future she'll end up being meta because the meta can shift, or she could get a buff to where she could get like this Cerise treatment where all of a sudden she's element neutral and much harder to counter. So at least throw her in storage and wait until we see what happens with her, because you never know how the meta will change. Make sure you keep one copy of everything. All right, moving on to the light units. We only have one light unit here at the bottom. We have Free Spirit Tiara, a free unit early in the game. Early in the game, she's great because you get her skilled up and all that. You could even argue she'd be higher on this list early game. Unfortunately, late game, you're never going to use her. So that's why she has to stick in at this D tier. Moving on up, we go jump all the way to A tier because most light units are really, really good. We will go to Guide Aryther first. Guide Aryther, although situational, brings a lot of value on arena offense. You can go. She can provide a attack buff. She's a mage, so she can hold book, and she can still one shot people. I've one shot legend MLKens, stuff like that with her all the time. She's nice for taking out Basar if you have everything tuned properly. Plus, she provides attack buff to the rest of your team. Really strong unit in that regard, but it takes a very specific team in order to work and a lot of speed tuning. So that's what makes her kind of niche. Moving on, Bingo, same sort of deal. Great, except he's another one with attack buff, but a great AoE damage dealer who also can heal at the same time, proc extra turn, give himself greater attack. You see a lot of Bingo cleaves out there. That being said, also very niche and relatively easy to counter, so you do have to be careful about that. But like I said, kind of niche. Then we have Light Silk. Light Silk's an interesting one, very much the same as Fire Litica, and that's why I put them in both in A tier. But she is element neutral, so that gives her an advantage in that regard. I think Fire Litica has the better kit now, but Light Silk being element neutral means she'd be better off, say, if you're trying to counter Cerise, for example. The base speed on Light Silk is really, really high, and you could just easily outspeed the Cerise and reset her down to 0, and she's basically disabled at that point. Then we have Fighter Maya. Fighter Maya is a lot of fun to use. Unfortunately, she's also very, very, very niche. I know a lot of people use her as a light tank in Guild War, and having a light tank in Guild War is ultra important late game because there's so many dark units out there. But there's also a lot of them out there. You can use Doris now, who is great. You can use General Purchase, you can use Maya, you can use all those units as light tanks. And then she's very slow, so using her outside of that is kind of difficult. I have mine built, not skilled up though, just because I can't justify putting the molas into her. But she is fun, and everybody loves her skill 3, so she gets a permanent A rank from me on this tier list. Moving on over, we have Watcher Shuri. Watcher Shuri is one of my favorite units to use. He is a fantastic single target damage dealer. I did put him at the same level as Surmia, even though if I had to pick one, I would definitely pick Shuri because he's got a speed imprint as well, and he's element neutral. The only difference is that he can't do his skill 3 on back-to-back turns, but if you're cleaving and you get to your second turn, then it's probably too late and you're probably dead anyway. So, watch Shuri, fantastic single target damage dealer, and 100% ignore defense, which is always nice. And now, moving over to the dark units. Let me move this list over for you a little bit here. At the very bottom, we have Leo. I won't say much about him. We've known he needs a buff for quite a while now. Moving all the way up to the B rank, we do have 2 units in B. First of all, Celestial Mercedes. I think Celestial Mercedes is best in slot on that Basar Tywin team that we talked about earlier. Unfortunately, outside of that, she basically has 0 use. I really like her animations. She does great damage into a defense break, but that's a lot of setup. Getting attack buff, defense break on everybody, and then being able to cleave is really, really difficult in the way the meta is right now. But if you can do it, she's best in slot. So very niche, but she can be used. Then we have ML the worst ML5 in the game right now. Pains me to say there's anybody worse than Dark Corvus, but I think ML Ken is that role now. It's widely considered that he needs a buff. Anybody who's champion or above will agree with you that he needs a buff. Um, I don't know what they're going to do to him without making him broken OP, but there's just so much that counters him now, and for the majority of the time, you can just ignore him. So he's in a really bad spot, and if you pull him, I'm very sorry. Put him in storage for now. Eventually, he'll get a buff, and hopefully, you'll be able to use him again. He used to be considered the best unit in the game, and it's funny how times change because he went from the best unit to the game in the game to one of the worst units in the game over the course of about a year and a half. So that's going to be it for the B tier. Moving back up to the A tier, the second worst ML5 in the game is going to be Dark Corvus. He really has no place in the game right now. You will see him occasionally in RTA, especially with the meta changes, with the frenzy changes in RTA. He takes a huge hit here, and basically everybody can deal with Dark Corvus now by the time he starts getting his skills off. So he took a huge hit in RTA, and he already was like ultra niche there to begin with. Really, the only place that he has any use now whatsoever is Guild War offense, and even then, it's kind of one of those. Well, I don't know what I'm going to beat this team with, so I'll bring Dark Corvus and friends. Usually, if you're late game, you don't need Dark Corvus. You've got plenty of things that can take care of any team without having to bring the Dark Corvus. He's kind of just a last resort. Maybe if you've lost, say you fought the same team 3 times and you lost the units to deal with that team, then maybe you bring in Dark Corvus as a last resort after the fact, after you lost a couple of units. That's really his only place. I have nothing good to say about him. I think he needs a buff as well. Moving on, we have Fat Cat. Fat Cat is an interesting unit. I've actually seen him used a bit in RTA. You still see him in high level, arena, late, and rush if you're trying to finish legend or high legend. People will still pop him in there just to try and discourage people and slow down their offenses. He's not going to get you wins, but he might discourage people from hitting you in the first place. Up next, we have Singelica, and a lot of people really love their Singelica. I've never been able to really make her work personally. I do think she's kind of niche, but if you don't have a lot of like RB counters, bringing her into revive comps can be a lot of fun. Can be a quick way to deal with RB if you can set it up, which means you can make a nice arena offense with that. I don't necessarily recommend it in RTA, but you could make a nice arena offense with Singelica if you want to do that. Up next, we have Kitty Clarissa. Kitty Clarissa, one of the easiest units to get high res. So if you're having a hard time with control teams, then you could build her. The reason she can be built so much high res is because she is a warrior, and you can put her on Strack, which can give her a crap ton more resistance, which is really nice. Also, top tier for Hall of Trials. If you're trying to do well in Hall of Trials, in terms of like the dagger achievements. Other than that, you don't really see her all that often, but she is good. She's just very niche. Moving on, we have Dark Rose. Dark Rose is a lot of fun. I really like Shadow Rose. She is very niche, but she does have a defense break, and if you burn into it, you can use it every single turn. And it is a strip defense break. Plus, she gives herself effectiveness now. Plus the strip pushback. Um, plus the pushback and this team boost. She can do a lot of things really well. I really enjoy using her. Um, that being said, she is niche, so she's going to come in at the A rank. And finally, for the A tier, we have Troublemaker Crozet. He's another one. Great unit. He provides a lot of utility and really can help you out in terms of keeping somebody alive. But very niche. He's really just a Protect X type unit. So that's going to be it for what do we start with? D tier? Yeah. So that's going to be it for D to A tier. So we're going to move all the way back over to the water units. Whoops. And we are going to jump up into the S tier. Well, I can't quite fit that all in there. All right. So we are into the S tier now. These are now going to be all units who are considered to be top tier and used regularly across multiple areas of the game. You can see I do have a couple units in the higher tiers that are marked in between levels here, but we will go over everybody one by one in detail now because these are the units who are regularly used everywhere. So starting with water, we're going to go one tier at a time now if you're trying to look for a certain unit. So we're going to go from S across, and then we'll go double S across, and then we'll go double S plus, and then triple S across. So leading off, starting with Crow. Crow is a unit who took a huge hit. Um, I debated him moving him lower on this list, to be honest with you. He took a huge hit in RTA. He's full out bad now in RTA, but he still has a place. He has a defense buff. He's good still, kind of like Dark Corvus in Guild War offense, as you can exploit the skill 3. And with people using more units like Landy, he can be good to counter Landy potentially in RTA, although I haven't seen it work very often. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if he's going to stay there or not, but looking at the rest of the S tier, I feel like he kind of belongs with the rest of the people in this tier. If we shift down a little bit, though, I do think he's better with the units in A tier, even though they're kind of niche. So uh, he's kind of in between there. Moving on, we have Water Kize. Now, Water Kize recently has gotten 2 buffs. First one, nobody built her, even though she got a shield and stealth, and then she got another buff and nobody built her again. But now, all of a sudden, with the meta changes and with things getting a little bit squishier, all of a sudden I'm starting to see her pop up quite a bit. So I bumped her up from A tier to S tier. I've seen her do some really impressive things so far in RTA, and I've definitely lost to some Kizes in RTA. If you ever faced Zezun in RTA, he's got a really nice Kize who can be really scary. So yeah, I really like her for RTA, and I think she's definitely top tier, and I think she definitely has a place there. That being said, she is a water unit, so you have to be careful who you bring her into, and she's still squishy, so you have to make sure there's no counters there. So she'd be kind of a last pick sort of deal, but she's still good there. Moving one over to the right, we have Regular Rose. Regular Rose is made herself famous by being a part of the famous Rose Cleave that was shown off in a lot of tournaments in terms of RTA. She doesn't really get any play anywhere else. But a lot of people really like that Rose Cleave. Unfortunately, the Rose Cleave is relatively easy to counter if you see it coming or if you know it's coming. So it's kind of died off quite a bit. Um, it's great for ladder if you're facing a lot of people that maybe don't recognize you. But if you're facing people within your bracket or like within the same level as you that are going to recognize your name, you're probably not going to be able to use that Rose Cleave very often. Same goes for tournaments. You don't really see her much in tournaments anymore because of that. But she's great for quickly climbing ladder, getting some quick wins, and keeping a relatively high win rate against those people who may not know you very well. Just so you know what she does have a boost and an attack bar buff, but it is AoE. So similar to an Oxlot's, the only downfall is that she does have low base speed. She does have a speed exclusive, which can give you 10 speed on the exclusive, but it's still not overly high. She's still kind of slow, so you won't be able to get her to like Cerise type speeds, but you don't need to. It's more of a slower cleave, where all you have to do is go first. You're not being speed contested. You just need that first turn. She pushes all your units up, and you get first 4 turns into the enemy team. And then our next specialty change, we have Monty. Monty, very good PvE unit. You don't see her much in PvP except for like mid-level Guild War. She's at this rank more of what she can do PvE wise in terms of her cleanses. Being able to cleanse every single turn is really nice, and probably one of the better specialty changes on this list. Moving on to Fire, we have Fire Ken. Fire Ken's recently gotten a buff. I know a lot of people didn't like his buff. I think his buff was actually quite good, and I think he does have a place in RTA. Kind of similar to Kize and Crow, though. You can't use him everywhere, but he does have much more reliable defense breaks now, and he does still get some attack scaling, so he's not purely HP based, and he's not overly negatively affected by Frenzy, so keep that in mind. People were a lot worried that he'd be crushed by the Frenzy changes, but he's really not. He's still pretty decent. Because the meta is squishier now, that makes him a little more relevant. Moving over, we have Ball and Cezanne. So Ball and Cezanne is one of the most hated units, I think. His design is awful. Not necessarily that it's awful. Like the art team, I feel like did a good job. I feel like they made a unit that was supposed to be hated, and they did a great job of that. Um, but it's just not something that's going to attract people to that unit. I think that's why he doesn't get a lot of love because he's got an incredible kit and he can hit hard. He's got a defense break. He's got uh, AoE slow, AoE defense break, AoE heal block. He's can reset his own skill 3 with another AoE, and he hits 2 units with his skill 1 and poisons. And in terms of PvE, he's probably one of the better PvE units in the game. He doesn't get any higher on the list because he is fire, unfortunately, and it's still a bit of a hit. You could use him as like part of a cleave. I used him in an arena cleave for a bit just to show that he wasn't as bad as everybody thought he was going to be. But he's still a mage and he does all that stuff. And any kit that has all of that in it means he's not bad. He just has unappealing art, so nobody ever uses him. But if you can get over the art style, you could definitely use him. And he can definitely provide you with something that you probably are lacking in your team. Up next, we have Tamarin. Tamarin, the Fire Soul Weaver that everybody wants until PvP, and then they stop using her. She's great in Raid. She's good in Hall of Trials. Outside of that, she doesn't really see any play. There's used to be Tamizaria teams. Doesn't really happen much anymore at high levels. She's impossible to use in RTA. She's impossible to use in Guild Wars. She's impossible to use on defense. She's great in PvE. That's why she gets this ranking. But for PvP, that's why she can't be put any higher. It's because she can't really be used much in PvP. Up next, we have Fire Cadies. Fire Cadies, one of the best cleansers in the game. Spectacular for PvE because she can cleanse every other turn, and that's an AoE cleanse with a heal, which is huge. Unlike Monty, Monty here has single buff cleanse with her AoE cleanse. Acades cleanse is a little bit better. The only difference is that Monty can cleanse every turn, whereas Acades can only cleanse every other turn. So you have to keep that in mind. She can be very annoying. Top tier for PvE. You could build her really high res because she has decent base speed. You can build her really high res and use her as your cleanser against debuff teams. The problem with that is that she doesn't provide immunity. So yes, she cleanses, but unlike units like Ray and DJ Basar, when she cleanses, she doesn't provide protection after that. So it kind of leaves you stuck. You'd have to be really well speed tuned for that to work. Moving over to the nature units. First up, we have Vildred. Vildred is another speed imprint, probably the most famous speed imprint out of all the speed imprints in the game. People use him a lot in the Oxlots, Judge Kize, Sedom, Vildred arena offense. He's great for cleanup. He can take multiple turns. As long as he kills somebody, he gets another turn. Plus, it's going to hit multiple people. He can actually use him to take out Tempest Cern if you kill somebody else on the team with it. So, like, say for example, it's Sid and Assassin Sid, some speed imprint, and Tempest Cern. You could use Vildred, outspeed, Oxlot's boost into Vildred. Vildred kills the Assassin Sid, brings the Tempest Cern to half health. Because he killed the Sid, gets another turn, and then finishes off the Tempest Cern. It's just an example, but I do use him in RTA as a speed imprint, and to very good success. He can do enough damage, so if you have a triple S Vildred, he's fantastic. If he's not triple S, then just hold on to him, and once you get him to triple S, you'll probably end up using him more. Up next, we have Sid. Sid's another good speed imprint. He does need speed buff, which he can give himself, but not on first turn. You can use him in PvE, you can use him in PvP. Again, speed imprints are really rare, but he does a crap ton of damage. His is just single target. If you're looking for a single target speed imprint, you go with him, as opposed to AoE, you'd go with Vildred. Then we have Lilibet. Lilibet, one of my favorite extinction units. I really like Lilibet. I use her a lot in my arena offense against Arby's. She provides her own anti-evasion mechanic, which is really nice. It means you can put her on a damage exclusive or damage artifact. Plus, she's got an exclusive. Relatively easy to gear. She's great at what she does. She's a little bit niche, but that's an important niche because of revives and because of Arby. So even though she's niche, she gets the S tier just because of the extinction and how valuable that can be. Then we move on to Celine. Celine recently got her exclusive, which caused a lot of drama when it first came out because people were freaking out that there's gonna be no way. They were just trying as hard as they could to kill Cleave in a pure tank meta. Um, it did work to a certain extent. You have to be very careful when people take Celine, and you have to find ways around it. And there are ways around it, which is the most important thing. You might have to build another unit in order to do so, but it's possible. And she isn't nearly as disruptive. I did move her up from A tier because of it. So she's now S tier and well deserving. I don't think she can go any higher than this because I don't think she's used really in any other way. Um, Even if she's like pimped out, you're not going to use her much against anything other than like Oxlot CDOM kind of deal. So slightly situational, but very, very, very good at that. So we will leave her at A rank. Moving on, we have Destina. Destina, similar to Acades and similar to Monty, fantastic cleanser. She not only provides the cleanse though, because it's on a long cooldown, but she has an attack bar boost with her skill 2, and if you're cleansing those debuffs, the debuffs will also provide attack bar boost as well with the cleanse. So one of the stronger cleansers in the game. Because there's so many, I can't justify moving her higher on the list, but she's incredibly good if you need a cleanser to be anti-control. And again, similar to the other two, they don't provide immunity when they cleanse. Then we have Vivian. Vivian is a fantastic AoE damage dealer, spectacular for Asomanic speedruns. Well, Asomanic in general, if you need immunity gear, or speedruns as well. Used a lot in one-shot comps. She also gets some play in RTA as well. Not as much recently. I think she might make a comeback though, with the meta changing the way it has. We might see a little more Vivian this upcoming season. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. But very, very good damage dealer, very scary. She does, however, need really good gear. And if you don't have really, really strong speed damage dealer gear, you probably won't like her as much. Moving on, we have Ray. Ray is potentially the best anti-control unit in the game. Again, control is so weak right now that I can't justify moving him up higher. But he's still the best at what he does because he not only cleanses, but he gets good resistance awakenings. He's got okay speed, and not only does he full cleanse, but he provides immunity after the cleanse, which is huge. So that immunity after the cleanse means no more debuffs after you get through the initial wave. So if people are trying to crowd control you and your Ray gets through and he resists the strip, the enemy just has to quit. That's the end of the fight because you resisted, you put up immunity, they have no more strips, it's game over. And then finally, for the nature units, we are going to wrap up with Charles. So Charles is a hard-hitting bruiser used to increase your RNG. We always say he's the pick and pray type unit. If you're behind in a fight and you need some RNG, you pick Charles. He's also good against units like Dizzy because you probably run him on Elbrus, right? Stuff like that. Anything that's going to be doing a lot of AoEs, even like SSB, you can bring him into. Um, or a lot of buffs if you need the strips into those AoEs, he can be good into. But mainly, he's a defense unit, and you don't see a lot of Charles anymore. He's kind of fallen off a little bit, even though when he goes crazy, he feels completely broken. It's so RNG that most of the time that person's losing more than they're winning, even though they might have RNG'd you. All right, let's shift this screen over a little bit so we can go to the light and dark units now. Shift that up just a little bit. So first up for the light units, we have another 3-star. This is, I think, the only 3-star on the list that's not a specialty change, and it's Mursa. Mursa, one of the strongest 3-stars in the game. She does provide a speed imprint, plus she has one-shot damage. I've actually one-shot a Ruel with this, if you can burn into the skill 3, because she can give herself speed buff and attack buff, which also both will increase her damage. That plus the burn, which is only 10 souls, can do massive damage with those two buffs. And like I said, she provides them for herself as soon as she gets hit. So that combined with 70% evasion if you're running Dreamblade makes her crazy hard to kill. Unless, of course, you're me in RTA. Quick side story: we had a fight today where I Mersa'd into a K-Ron, got 20% countered, and he 20% dust deviled, and he crit her both times. So he went 20% counter, 20% dust devil, 30% crit, 30% crit, and killed her, which I thought was kind of funny. We still ended up winning the fight because we had already practiced passive, but it was entertaining nonetheless. But regardless of that, she's still very good. She hits very hard. She's got a speed imprint. Plus, she's got evasion, so she's hard to kill. Mersa coming in at S rank. Up next, we have Specimen Says. So Specimen Says, fantastic evasion unit, somewhat hard to use, but if you're running a control team, he is a must ban. If you ever see someone running a control team and they bring Specimen Says, no matter what else they bring, you have to ban him. It's an auto ban because if he gets through, you lost. Because they're going to stun somebody and he's going to get a turn before your cleanser. So say he brings in 2 strips, 2 control units, and says, before my I bring Ray and Destina in as my 2 cleansers, he's gonna go before and he's gonna nuke one of the 2 units that are stunned before I can cleanse them. So you wanna leave the control in and ban that spez. That being said, if you're the one running the control team, you probably want to bring Spez because he's a must ban and he's the one thing that makes control teams a little bit scary. Up next, we have ML Era, speaking of control teams, and the reason she's not higher on this list is everything I just outlined. Very, very easy to counter. All you got to do is resist with your cleanser and then cleanse after she stuns. Just let them strip, let them stun, resist with your Ray, and then cleanse it all off again. But she's great for PvE. She can stun, she can proc into another AoE, into another stun, into burns. If she gets cycling and there's no immunity there, you're dead. So she's very scary. Unfortunately, she's still easy to counter. So for that reason, she can't be any higher on the list, but she's still very good. And once she gets going, she's unstoppable. And then another anti-control unit, if you're noticing a theme, in this S tier, we have DJ Basar. So similar to Ray, he does cleanse and he provides immunity. He's probably the second best in terms of cleansers because of that. Unfortunately, he doesn't awaken into as much res, which makes him a little harder to gear than Ray. He's going to have lower speed and lower res, but if you have good enough gear, he could actually be better because not only is he cleansing and putting up immunity, but he's also boosting the rest of your team behind to make sure you don't get cut after you do the cleanse. So Ray can be very, very good. I wish I had him. I don't think he needs a buff necessarily, but if you compare him right next to Ray, then you could argue he does. But I still think he's very good. Up next, Crimson Armin. Crimson Armin is an interesting unit. Crimson Armin was one of the best units in the game for defense, and then she fell off, but she still provides the same stuff, even though she got nerfed. She still provides invincibility and immunity. I can't justify bringing her lower, even though I rarely, if ever, see her anymore. I do think she could be used in the right situation, and because of her kit, I'm going to keep her at this S rank, at least for now. Although in RTA, she did take a big hit from these frenzy changes, so we will have to see how that plays. Maybe next tier list we'll see her down in A rank, but she's still got such a loaded kit that I had to keep her here. And then moving on to the dark units, we'll start at the bottom here. We have Briarwitch Izaria. Briarwitch Izaria with a full strip into buff block. Now, people talk about how Basar is broken OP and how Izaria needs a buff, but they both have buff block as their primary debuff on their skill 3. Unfortunately for her, even though she's element neutral, people don't like the fact that she doesn't have the pushback, 1. So she can't be used as seamlessly as Basar. And 2, she's ideally supposed to counter things like Rylet. Unfortunately, it's not 100%. So she can't be really high on this list because it's not 100%, and she just misses too often. She just doesn't even try and strip. It's not that she's getting resisted. She just is like, I don't feel like it. That being said, I think on Guiding Light, she's crazy strong. Can be still very good against Rylet. So she's an interesting unit. I think she's underrated. That being said, if she gets a buff, I don't I don't think it'll be nearly as like earth-shattering as some of the units that have gotten buffs recently. I'm looking at you, Tywin, and Litica. But yeah, we might see her get a buff, but I do think she's underrated, so we're gonna keep her at S tier. She does provide value, and people say she's terrible, but then whenever you see her in RTA, she always gets banned. So she's not as bad as people say she is. Up next, we have Assassin Collie. Assassin Collie, great single target damage dealer, great counter cleave. That being said, for counter cleave, most people go Sid, so she's primarily used in more of an offensive role, where Assassin Sid is used more in the counter cleave defensive role. But they're both kind of the same units. We'll deal with them both here at once. They both have really good base speed. They both do really good damage. Collie's damage is better, particularly because she can burn. And also, because you're using it more on offense, the fact that she can go into stealth makes her much more likely to survive longer in longer fights. And then you've got units like Sid, who he provides evasion, but he's very easy to kill after first turn. So if you need to go after first turn, you probably don't go Sid. You probably go Collie. But both units are very good. It just depends on your playstyle and what you're trying to use them for. Uh, both crazy strong though for what they do. That the only problem with them, I guess, is that there's a lot of AoEs out there right now. A lot of the main bruisers and a lot of the tanks out there have an AoE, which is able to take her out of stealth. And usually there's some sort of Aureus or Adamant to prevent the Sid from being able to kill anything. So unless it's pure single target, where Collie would be good, or it's Cleave, where Sid would be good, you don't really see as much of them anymore, but they are both really, really strong. Then we have BBK. BBK is basically the souped up version of Celestial Mercedes because she provides more than just the damage. She can self heal, she can do bonus damage as she loses HP. She's all around, can be very scary, and can be built a little bit differently and has better base stats than Celestial Mercedes, but she's primarily used in cleaves a la Judge Kize. She's kind of a budget Judge Kize if you want to look at her that way. Then moving on, we have Rin. ML Rin provides immunity, which is huge in the meta right now. Plus she strips, plus she has a stun. Primarily you see her counter cleave, but you can also sometimes see her against units like DN. Very strong. I really like Roana. She has insane base speed, very easy to get to 300 speed. If you're trying to counter cleaves and you have a hard time with it, she could definitely be your speed option. Up next, we have Shooting Star Cades. So Shooting Star Cades is a reviver. Revives can be very strong. That being said, they did take a little bit of a hit in RTA, but she's spectacular in Guild War, specifically in certain interactions where you just want to keep the unit alive. Like if you're running, we talked about Crow earlier. Um, if you want to run her with Crow so that he doesn't die, so he gets all the way down to 0 HP before he does his skill 3, that can be great. Can also be a good combo with Corvus. Can be a good combo with a lot of units. Can be a good Corvus with anyone that's squishy that you just want to keep alive for an extra couple of turns. Very, very strong. And she has a full heal on her skill 3, which is nice as well. Then we have Sigrid. So Sigrid is a relatively new unit, so she's still a little bit flexible on here. Oh crap! I forgot Morty, didn't I? We'll go back to Morty after this before we go to Double S. So Sigrid, very strong in terms of her single target new capabilities into shield. I think she'd be great in an arena offense cleave team. That being said, she's really hard to use in RTA because of her shields. She needs shields to exist. So if the enemy brings FCC and you bring in Sigrid, but they ban the Sigrid and you leave in the CC, you're going to have a hard time because you have nothing to get through the shield. Or vice versa, if you ban the Sigrid, if you bring Sigrid and you ban the Cecilia, then your Sigrid doesn't really provide you any value anymore. So for RTA, she's very, very hard to use. But Guild War and Arena, I do think she has a place on offense. She doesn't really have much of a place in PvE. But if you're looking for a Guild War offense or Arena offense unit, she will be spectacular for those cleaves. And then we have Morty. So Morty way down here at the bottom. I'm going to put him in this S tier. I do think he's similar to Chu, who we'll talk about in a minute with the water units, but I think he's a slightly worse Chu. I kind of put him in the same tier as Charles. Um, he's a bruiser. He's okay. He can do okay damage. The problem is he doesn't really have any self-sustain. He's going to be kind of squishy. Units like, for example, Alencia do the same thing, except she has a strip and a defense buff to protect herself. Um, so even though, and I think she does more damage on top of it, but just the fact that he doesn't do much with his skill 3 and injury is so bad. Um, I put him in the S tier. That being said, I do think people are going to hate on him quite a bit, and for that reason, I think he's actually going to be underrated. People are going to say he needs a buff when really I think he'll just be kind of niche. You'll bring him in against like SSB teams or SSB Spectre teams where you need a tanky AoE, and he'll be a great option in those teams. But don't count on the injury to bail you out any. All right. Moving back over to water for triple S first, double S first, I guess. Let's center this up. We're going to start with DN. So you can see we have 4 units in double S. This Cerise is going to be double S plus. We'll talk about her in a second though. So first up, we have DN. DN is top tier Soul Weaver. She's a limited unit, kind of hard to get, but we might be seeing her again sometime this month, hopefully. For those of you that don't have her, she provides attack buff, anti crit. You can put her on staff to heal. Plus, she has a cleanse and a self attack bar boost and a shield. She can be very annoying to deal with on the enemy team if you have damage dealers that you need to crit. So keep her in mind if you're looking for an offensive base Soul Weaver. So if you're bringing any kind of damage dealer that needs an attack buff that doesn't provide one for themselves, she can be very strong. It's still very hard to deal with. It is only 50% chance to crit into anti-crit, but if you've ever tried to crit into something like Moonlight Dreamblade, and that's only 20% chance to miss, you know how hard a 50% chance to crit can be. Then we have Dizzy. Dizzy's still top tier. She's making a bit of a comeback. I actually had her at S rank and I moved her up to double S because of the frenzy changes. She does make a little bit of a comeback now that things are a little bit squishier. That being said, immunity still counters her, and she's still a mage, so she's relatively squishy, and you can deal with her pretty easily. But she's still top tier. She can still shut down teams if they can get their strip off, or if you don't bring immunity. So Dizzy keeps her rank at double S, as well as being really, really, really strong in PvE. And then we have Chu. We just talked about her a little bit with the Morty appearance there at S rank. But Chu, top tier water bruiser. I know some people don't like her design. I think she's just cute. She's a nice unit, cool design. Um, I don't know. She's got an AoE that provides anti-crit, similar to DN. If you're not bringing DN, she could be a good replacement in order to help keep your team alive. Plus, she's good into some debuffs on first turn because she provides herself immunity. She helps herself cycle. She can do huge damage with her skill 2. Plus, if you get max stacks, you can do it twice in a row, which is nice. I've used her to deal with all sorts of fire units. I've had her one-shot Ravi's quite easily, and she's also helped deal with Dark Corvus, stuff like that. So she can be very scary, hits very hard. I really like my Chu. I use her quite regularly in RTA, and yeah, I not much else to say about her. I think she's very underrated, and I think everyone should have a bruiser in every element if you're doing top tier RTA and even Guild War. It's always nice to have someone that can do damage but also take a hit of that element, and she's a good option for that. If you need a water bruiser, she's probably your go-to. We're going to come back to the double S plus units, but let's make our way across. Up next, we have Fire Charlotte. So Fire Charlotte, I just made a video talking about the most affected units by Frenzy. She was one of the ones on the Fire list, and if you need an AoE bruiser in the Fire category, you probably go her. She's probably your top tier Fire bruiser in terms of AoE. Obviously, Fire Ravi would be the single target one. She does have an AoE, but not regularly, and you can't do it right away. So because you have to wait on her AoE, I would say Charlotte for the AoE bruiser and Ravi for the single target. Although later in fights, she obviously basically turns into an AoE. Then we have Lilius. Lilius is a unit that I don't personally use very often, but I know people use her constantly. Mine just loves teaming up with Maid Chloe. I always joke around that even if I don't bring Maid Chloe in the team, she somehow still teams up with Maid Chloe. But other people's do a great job of teaming up into Spectre all the time. So if you happen to have a Lilius that teams up with Spectre a lot, then you should probably be using her. She's very good. She's got a cleanse. She's got a provoke. She's got an automatic team up on skill 1. She's great for Hall of Trials, great for PvE, and can be used in top tier PvP as well. Up next, our next specialty change in Adventure, Raz. So, Adventure Raz, I believe, is the one of only one of only three stars remaining on the list. Him, Flurry, and Doris. All of them in double S here. I've grouped them all together. He's crazy strong. He pairs very well with damage dealers that are hard to kill. He pairs very well with Landy, pairs very well with Spectre. A lot of the top damage dealers in the game he pairs very well with, which is very scary. Plus, he provides defense buff and immunity. Very good unit, and when used properly, can be top tier for any PvE, any PvP, even though you won't probably use them that much in PvE. So keep him in mind if you are looking for a free late game tank that can provide a lot of utility. Up next, we have Kairon. Kairon, the anti-cleave RNG king. He can potentially solo an anti-cleave given the right situations and the right gear. Outside of that, he's probably not very good, but in terms of what he does, he's fantastic. He can still do big damage. You don't see him very often other than that, but he can be a good bait for Guild War. And like I said, good counter cleave all the way around. That's going to be it for him. Up next, we have Tenebrae, Fire Tenebria. Fire Tenebria, great crowd control unit, probably the best crowd control unit, pure crowd control unit outside of the strips. She fits in the same role as ML Era, but she can also skill 1 sleep, boosting her own attack bar, generating a lot of turns, plus crowd controlling a lot. So I do have her slightly higher than ML Era, but you could argue that they're on the same tier. Maybe she should be down 1. But she also provides defense breaks, which can punch holes in teams depending on the right speed tuning. Moving on to the nature units. Up first, we have the newly buffed Landy. Landy is a scary one because she did just get these buffs, so it's kind of hard to say where she's going to fall in the meta. But she does a great job of dealing with a lot of the triple S units. So units like FCC, ML Crow, Alencia, Cecilia. In terms of lesser used units, units like regular Crow, she deals with very well. Anyone with debuffs, basically, she's very good against, and can be very scary. So I've been using her a lot in RTA recently. I've been enjoying her. If you need a nature bruiser that has regular AoEs, she's a great option. She can be kind of squishy, so you do have to be careful about that. But on the other hand, you can always put her on Guiding Light, or you can put her on Proof of Valor to try and protect her. Up next, we have Nature Euphine. Euphine, one of my favorite art styles in the game. I really like her. She kind of doesn't get a lot of play. I've been using her recently a little bit in RTA. It's been kind of hard to use her because she's a bit squishy, but I've got her built really fast instead of bruiserish. But she's been a lot of fun, and she's spectacular for Guild War. One of the best Guild War offense units. She can just nuke people and then control, take multiple turns, silence, self buff, defense break, stun, you name it. She's got a loaded kit. I think she's very underrated, and she's another one where people say she's not good, but then every time she's drafted, she gets banned. So she's not as bad as people say she is when she's their go-to ban. She's just somewhat hard to use and does have high gear requirements. Also can be very good for one-shot teams. And then up next we have Izaria. Same thing with her, actually. She's another one that people are like, oh, Isaria's not that good, but then every time they see her, they ban her. She's a must ban. She pairs so well with so many units. She was triple S for a long time. I did drop her down a little bit, but she's starting to see a little more play. I think the later this game goes on, the more people are going to use her. I think her reset ability is a huge sleeper. Plus the fact she has an S1 defense break. She has an S3 that strips and defense breaks. Very difficult unit to deal with. She's crazy strong, and I think we're going to start seeing more of her now with this meta change. And the final unit for the double S nature units is going to be Falconer Clary, our second last 3-star on the list. You could argue that she's triple S. At times, she's crazy, crazy strong, and she cycles, and she takes extra turns, and she boosts her own attack bar into another turn, and she self heals. Plus, she defense breaks and provokes. When she works, she can be the best unit in the game. But if you've ever used Flurry, you know that there's a lot of res checks on her skill 3. So if you're trying to skill 3 somebody that has immunity, you need to strip, and you need a defense break, and you need to provoke. That means you have to go through 3 different 15% res checks, and it's very hard to land all 3 of them regularly. So for that reason, I can't justify putting her up in triple S, but she's still crazy good for what she does. And she can change the tide of a match all by herself. Moving on to the light units, we're going to start at the bottom with our final specialty change and our final 3-star, Doris. Doris has been a nice surprise for anybody that's built her. She's very tanky. She has probably the best light tank in the game now if you're looking for a light tank for Guild War. She's also got a great heal. She's fantastic against AoEs. She's got a cleanse. She's got attack bar boost. You can use that attack bar boost to change the fight. Plus, the defense buff and heal over time are really strong, and she can be really annoying. So, I put her right up there with Ruel and Maid Chloe, and I think she's more than deserving of that spot. Up next, we have Ruel, and I have to be careful about how I say this because I really don't like Ruel. I got Ruel from the coin shop, and she's been a huge disappointment for me. I geared her up, I maxed out her skills, and she's basically benched. She's on my Guild War defense, and she's on my arena defense, and that's it. I never use her in RTA. I think she took a huge hit with the new Frenzy changes. She used to be triple S, but I moved her down. We almost never see her in Legend RTA anymore, and very rarely in Champion RTA. She just doesn't bring enough to the table. If you're using her, you're behind, and you're trying to catch up. So ideally, you don't want to be behind in the first place, so you're not bringing her. Um, but yeah, she can still be used. She's still good and like still a really strong unit and probably the best for defenses. But for RTA offense specifically, I just don't think she's cutting it anymore. So that's why she drops down from triple S to double S. Obviously, double S, if you look at the rest of these units, she's still very good. I don't want you to think that I'm saying she's bad. But just for arena or just for RTA, she kind of falls off a little bit, and that's why she dropped down the list. Whereas all the triple S units are good everywhere. Then we have Maid Chloe. Maid Chloe is another one who used to be up higher. She dropped down before Ruel did, but she's kind of maintained her rank. She's basically the same as Ruel, except she has an AoE revive, even though it's a small, comes back with no HP and no protection. But she also provides attack buff, so similar to like a DN. Plus, she's very good in Frenzy because she can do that skill 1 stun and burn into extra turns, reducing her own cooldown, which is big. Plus, with the Frenzy changes, she now gets added effectiveness, so I've had her stun Ruels and like full out stun lock Ruels for the remainder of the fight, which is hilarious to watch. Um, I think they deserve to be on the same level now. I know a lot of people when they come into stream and they see me using Maid, they're like, "Why are you using Maid?" And I'm like, "Well, because I like the attack buff, and she does a better job than Ruel." And I think people are surprised to hear that, but I think for late level RTA, they're on the same level. And for anything offensive, you'd probably rather use Maid, and for defense, you'd probably rather use Ruel. So that's why I put them on the same level. Up next, we have Broman. Broman, we talked about earlier. He's one of the best strips in the game. He is a little bit RNG because although his strip is 100%, his silence is not, and he has nothing to do with his silence, or nothing to do with his strip if he doesn't silence. So unlike Basar, who has the 100% strip into pushback and buff block, he needs that silence. Otherwise, the strip probably does nothing. So when he works, he can completely lock you down all by himself. When he doesn't, he's kind of useless. So I can't justify putting him on Basar's tier because of that. But he's a very close second. He's still crazy strong. He's very annoying. He's a must ban most of the time. and I'm sure you've all faced Bromans who have locked you down. Up next, we have Sage Ball. Sage Ball, with the recent buffs, jumps up this list. He was on, I can't remember if I had him at S tier or A tier last list that we had, but I moved him up to double S here because he has become very, very good at counter cleave. I had a fight tonight where a legend player tried to cleave me. He tried to kill my Sage, didn't kill with his attack buff and burned Sedom. And then Sage went, killed the other damage dealer, one-shot them with his skill 3, and silenced the rest of the team, and then the enemy quit. That was the whole fight. Was Sedom into Sage, Sage into, I forget who the damage dealer was, but it one-shot a damage dealer, and then he had to quit because his whole team was silenced, and my whole team was at full health. So, Sage is very strong. Don't sleep on him. If you have him, you should be building him now. I have two. I was debating building a second. I don't think I'm going to, but you could justify it. He's very, very, very good now. And then finally, for the light units, we have Judge Kize. Still the best arena offense cleave in terms of AoEs. It's always going to be Judge Kize. Oxalot's into Judge Kize is always going to be the go-to for those teams that you can AoE cleave. 2 AoEs, you burn into it. She can strip and reset abilities as well if you happen to land it. Not as much play in RTA anymore, although she can be used. Also still good in Guild War, depending on your level. So she comes in at double S. And then everybody in the dark tier I have at double S plus. So let's move back over to water, and we'll go through these double S plus units. Before we get into them, the reason that I have them at double S plus is because I have them at double S, and I just think there's something missing for them to be in triple S. So they're kind of in between the two. I don't know how else to explain it other than being in between the two. But all of these units are some of the more popular units in the game in terms of arena offenses. They're not broken in any way, but they're insanely strong right now. First up, Cerise. So Cerise, I know a lot of people are complaining she's broken. I definitely don't agree with that. I think she's fine the way she is, and I never use her. I actually probably leave her in more than I used to, which is strange. She still has the strip. It's just now element neutral, and she has the team ups on skill 1, so she can win you fights that she wouldn't have won before. But I think people underestimate how strong she was before. She's still primarily used for the strip, slow, and restrict, which she already did. So yes, she can win more fights than she used to, but I think the reason people think she's so broken now is purely because they never faced her before and they didn't realize how strong she was before the buff, and how little she needed it. So very strong. I can't put her in the triple S tier, but you could argue that she should be there. Yeah, that's about it for her. Very strong, very good base speed. Somewhat hard to gear, but definitely worth it. Up next, we have Fire Ravi. So Fire Ravi, if you did watch that last video about the units most affected in RTA by the Frenzy change, she was ranked number 1. Reason being, she increases damage as fight goes on and just passively, and then now with the RTA changes, she does it again. So late in fights, Ravi is broken. She can solo a lot of stuff. She can be very scary all the way around, and I know she's become a must ban for a lot of people. Plus, especially once she gets into the AoEs, if you have no immunity and she starts just locking down your team over and over, Ravi's very scary. You can run her on counter or speed as long as you've got some sort of protection for her to get her to the point where she can start spamming AoEs. She's going to be very good for you. Very good against all the nature units as well. That's usually what I see her into, is if someone picks 2 nature units, then Ravi gets picked almost automatically. We have no one here in this list. You could argue Landy could be double S plus, but nobody from the nature units in the double S plus. Let's move over to the light units, light and dark units. Shift this over. So for the light units in the double S plus, we have Tempest Cern. Tempest Cern, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the complaints about her being overly strong. I think there's a lot of ways to deal with her. I think the people that still struggle with her just haven't found ways to deal with her yet. but there's definitely ways to deal with her. Immunity hard counters her. Champions are auto hard counters her. Tanks out counter her. Full counter her. There's a lot that deals with her. Um, you just have to really understand her mechanics. A lot of people go into her and do things that don't counter her and then complain she's broken, which is understandable. Her kit is kind of hard to understand, but once you get it and you know why she's not dying, and you bring things like, say you bring ML or you bring Water Sigrid in to deal with her, you better ban the immunity. Otherwise, if you try and do it, well, you better ban the Aureus. If you leave Aureus in and then you try and Sigrid into her, of course she's not going to die. Same with shields. So you just have to pay attention and know when there's an Aureus or know when there's a shield and treat it accordingly and make sure you have something to deal with it. I don't think that's a bad thing. It makes her very strong, but it doesn't make her broken in any way, and it doesn't make her triple S in any way. Um, but she does do very good damage. She's hard to kill, and you do have to pay attention to her, which is enough to put her at this double S plus ranking. Next up, we have LQC. So LQC I already had in this double S bracket before her buffs, so she moves up very slightly. I thought she was already insanely strong. I used her all the time in RTA. These buffs are just a nice little boost. The skill 3 is like a bonus. The skill 3 splash damage isn't huge, but it's enough to make an impact, particularly if you're cleaving. The thing that I feel the most when I'm using her now post buff is the skill 1 damage boost. The skill 1 damage boost is noticeable, and it makes a big difference especially in RTA, where that every little bit of damage counts. Not having to wait back around to her skill 3 before she does damage again is really nice. She can actually kill people with her skill 1 now. Moving on to the dark units, the first up is Rylet. So Rylet is, everybody knows, really strong, 70% evasion, similar to, well, 70 or 80% evasion, depending on your artifact. Plus, he has crazy good base speed. So some people will build him on lifesteal, some people will go speed. I prefer mine on speed, but a lot of people prefer lifesteal. Um, Crazy strong unit. What can I say? He's a hard hitting damage dealer. A lot of people will use him to go first and snipe units like Vivian or Charles. Any squishy units that are going to be really scary, you can pick a Rylet into and probably snipe them on turn 1 and make it much easier to deal with the enemy team. Next up in the double S plus bracket, we have Spectre Tenebria. So Spectre Tenebria actually moved up this bracket, which is surprising. I'm not a huge fan of her damage at the beginning of fights, but against single target teams, she's still broken. If they don't ban her and you're all single target, she'll just solo. Because you can't hit her at all. And she just kind of sits there and waits for her turn. You can't do anything about it, and then she will eventually wear you down. So, although her early match damage isn't great, as the fight goes on, her damage, as she gets stacks, her damage escalates quickly, and she can, especially late in Frenzy, just destroy teams by herself. So I think she gets a slight boost with the current meta, and especially for RTA. So Spectre Tenebria comes in at double S plus just because she's so unique and can deal with things that other units just can't deal with. Then we have ML Haste. ML Haste sometimes against the right teams feels completely broken, and then against other teams he does nothing. So he doesn't. The fact that he's supposed to be really only anti-revive and he's used as regularly as he is shows how strong he is. Not quite good enough to be triple S, but he's still insanely strong, especially against the right comps. Units like Maid Chloe, people assume she's bad now just because of how good he is into her. But I still use Maid Chloe all the time, just not into him because he is a hard counter to Maid Chloe, and also can be really good into RB, providing whenever somebody dies, being able to provide that immunity and that huge shield, plus being able to be a fixed damage dealer that also heals is very scary. If you're trying to go more offensive and you don't necessarily want to waste the spot on a healer because you want more damage, bringing somebody like him is nice because he provides that damage while still healing at the same time. And then finally, Lulu, the beginning of the meta change. Lulu, um, I thought she was going to be good. I'm shocked at how much she changed the meta. She really changed things to be a lot faster now. Um, teams before that were like quote unquote mid speed are now crazy fast because of her. She's able to function like a rose. She basically is what Water Rose used to be in terms of making your team go first. She boosts everybody up, gets your entire team a turn before the enemy goes, and you're either able to A, kill somebody right away, say you go Lulu into Rylet, or Flurry into Lulu, or Flurry into Rylet, whatever the combination is, you're able to kill somebody on first turn, and all of a sudden it's 4v3, and you have a huge advantage. Or you're able to buff up, and the enemy's not able to get through all the buffs. So she can be good either way, plus she protects herself with the stealth. Very good unit. Definitely a meta changer, even though you don't necessarily need her. She's responsible for the fact that everything got so much faster so quickly. Um, you don't need her. You don't need to pick her all the time if you do have her. But if you're wondering why things got so fast, you can thank her. And finally, we have our final tier of the video. Let's move back over here. We're on to the triple S units. And oh my god, I'm almost out of breath. So, triple S units, water units, same as they were last quarter. We have SSB and Sigrid. SSB still crazy strong. I think she actually gets a slight boost with this new meta. Uh, if anything, she was triple S. She started to dip at the end of last season, and now with the new meta changes, she kind of gets a little bit of a boost again because things aren't as tanky that she's not completely useless anymore in those tanky teams. She can definitely wear them down. So I've been using her at least personally more, and I've been seeing more of her. Whereas at the end of last season, we didn't see her at all. So nice to see SSB making a bit of a comeback. I think people forgot just how strong she can be. So SSB definitely making a comeback. She's crazy strong in every aspect of the game. You can use her for farming. You can use her for Wyvern. You can use her for Wyvern. You can use her for any other sort of PvE. You can use her for Guild War. You can use her for Arena. You can use her for RTA. Probably the most flexible unit in the game. I would say I would go with that. But the most flexible unit in the game, using the most content, probably SSB. Up next, we have Sigrid. Sigrid, the best extinction unit in the game. I use her all the time. I went into Guild War today, and I went Oxlots into Sigrid, and I killed Rylet. I killed. I procced Kayron's passive, and I killed Sid. All in the same turn. Killed all three of them. Well, killed two and procced the Kayron passive, all in the same turn. She's crazy. She does it all. You name it. Sigrid, in terms of extinction, is insane. She can deal with Arby. She can deal with multiple units at once. She can deal with tanky units. She can deal with revivers. She's so strong. And on top of all that, she's the best Wyvern unit in the game. If you are just starting the game, she's probably your best starting unit as well as one of the best late game units. So if you have Sigrid and she's not plus 15, you are not playing the game right. Arguably the most valuable unit in the game right now would be her. Up next, we have Fire Cecilia. In terms of triple S units, I think this is going to be the most controversial of all of them. I had to move her up. I've been using her nonstop for 2 seasons now, and she's just as important on my team as ever. And I've tried multiple times to bring my FCC in place of Fire Cecilia, and I always go back to Fire Cecilia. Now, for other reasons, for other aspects of the game, Fallen Cecilia is better. She's better for defense. She's better for most Guild War situations. She's better for Arena. But for RTA specifically, I would argue that Fire Cecilia is probably better than FCC. And obviously that depends on your team and how you're using her. But for me, her kit is just loaded. She has skill 1 defense break, skill 2 strip, skill 2 AoE, skill 2 AoE attack break, skill 3 immunity, that's AoE immunity, skill 3 AoE provoke, and skill 3 self shield to protect from the incoming attacks from the provoke. She does more with her kit than probably anybody else. Granted, she's fire. But if you've ever seen me do RTA, you know how valuable she is to my team. I just can't not have her triple S anymore. I use her everywhere. I use her in PvE. I use her in Guild War. I use her in Arena. She's on my offense. She's on my defense, and I use her in pretty much every single RTA fight, unless I'm cleaving. That's the only place I don't use her is in RTA cleave. So if you're sleeping on her, take another look at her kit, because she's crazy strong and she's got good base stats on top of it. Up next, nature units, we have Basar. We talked about Basar a little bit already. Everybody knows what he does. He doesn't need a big explanation. He strips plus buff blocks plus attack bar pushbacks, allowing other things to happen after him without him getting cut. Plus, he can run Crown, which will always stun. Not actually, but it should. It feels like it always stuns the person that you need to go next. That buff block can be completely debilitating, which is part of the reason why I had MLI Zarya as high as I had her. Because AoE buff block is so strong. So Basara comes in at triple S for the second or third quarter in a row. And then we move on to Alencia. So we did mention her earlier as well. Probably the best, definitely the best nature bruiser in the game. One of the best bruisers overall in the game. She does huge damage. She can basically anti-cleave. Another fight I can think of tonight I went into, that one of those same fights with like a Sage Ball situation. They tried to kill the Sage, didn't kill. I think actually they banned the Sage because of what happened the previous fight. So they banned the Sage. They tried to go into Maid, couldn't kill the Maid. My Alencia got a turn, and she basically one-shot the entire team, and that was it. And then on top of it, she also provides defense buff, which is really nice. So you don't need to use her into counter cleave. You can use her in any situation. Plus, she does obviously the huge damage. She has defense break. She has Mind's Eye, which scares people away from hitting her, but also gives her boosted effectiveness and 2 attacks on her skill 1. She's completely busted. She's one of the scariest units to face in RTA because of the damage she can do and also the utility she provides for the team, because she also happens to have a skill 3 strip. So Alencia, one of the best units in the game, and one of the only 5 triple S RGB units in the game as well. Moving on to the light dark units. Let me shift this over so you can see it better. We will start off with Flitica. So Flitica, the queen of cleave, you see her all the time. You can use her in control comps, but mainly she's used in like CDOM cleaves, whether it be Arena offense, Guild War offense, or RTA. You can also use her without cleaving. You can also just use her as a booster, but primarily her number one job is to cleave, and then maybe you'll adjust out of that, but she's top tier, one of the best units in the game. She opens with the skill 2 strip and attack bar buff for your team, plus gives herself another turn if she crits. Actually, she doesn't need crit there, does she? She gives herself another turn because she gets attack bar for everybody she goes on, which would be 4 units, so you get a full 25% each, which would be 100%. So she gets another turn. Her skill 3 then full resets. So if you're building her with crit rate neck so that she crits to boost CDOM, and then if you're building her with an effectiveness ring, she'll probably have enough effectiveness to reset as well. So you could, like, for example, strip, boost up your CDOM, boost herself up plus the rest of your team, nuke somebody, and then use the Litica, nuke with CDOM, and then use the Litica to reset the Ruel or whoever the annoying person is on defense that you don't want to kill and you just want to reset them. You can reset them. That also applies for CERN. You can reset CERN. Another nice way to deal with a Tempest CERN there, especially because she has low res. But you can do that. She can also burn into her skill 3. She can blind with her skill 1. On top of all that, she's crazy fast. Lots of good artifact choices as well. Primarily Sachet is really good on her to help keep your team cycling really fast so the enemy can't cut. And then on top of it all, if she crits with her skill 3 during her reset, she gives you AoE skill prevent, the same as Fallen Cecilia, which can be great to counter units like Kayron. Stops Kayron from soloing you. You don't even have to worry about the Kayron if the Flitica's there. So, great option for cleaves. Definitely best in game cleave unit for sure. No questions asked. Then we move into Tywin. Tywin has actually gotten moved down a little bit. He was triple S plus last quarter, and we don't have any triple S plus units this quarter. He's back down to normal triple S. He's still completely busted. He's so strong. He takes a tiny, tiny, tiny nerf, I guess, with the new frenzy changes, but at the same time, he gets increased effectiveness, so it also gives him a little bit of a buff. That being said, there are now 2 immunity units out there that are used regularly in Kraut and Cecilia, so that does hurt him a little bit in terms of his usage. And now with Morty as well, if people start using him against Tywin, that'll be one more way to help deal with Tywin in terms of anti-stuns. So it'll be interesting to see what his play looks like once people start using Morty a little more often. But I think his main value comes in with the automatic cleanse and the soul steal. I think that's what makes him kind of broken. On top of the fact that he can burn and only have 2-turn cooldown on his stun, essentially allowing him to stun every single turn because of the slow. So one of the best control units in the game. You don't need to go control in order to bring him, which is kind of crazy. So the fact that you can run a control comp and a bruiser comp at the same time if you have him puts him triple S, and he's definitely the best at what he does in the game. And then moving on, we have ML Crow. Thank God he arrived to help nerf the Tywin. Unfortunately, I didn't get him. So ML Crow, one of the more prevalent units in RTA right now, one of the hardest hitting units in RTA, and although you can avoid him from going skill 3 every turn, if he's picked in the right spot against a lot of AoEs, he can definitely just spam his skill 3 over and over, which does big damage, especially as he gets stacks. Plus, he gives himself a speed buff. Plus, he gives shields to the team, keeping the team alive. Plus, he gives self immunity, well, team immunity. He does so much. Very scary unit to face. I think Landy is probably his best counter now. But I don't know what else to say about him. I mean, if you have him, congratulations. I think he is opening people's eyes to how strong Cecilia is, because now they're realizing how nice it was to have immunity on Crow. They're building Cecilia in case their Crow gets stolen. And it's kind of shone a light on how important immunity is once people got him. Because I've definitely seen an influx of Cecilias since Crow made his first appearance, which is kind of funny that it took another immunity unit to give her the attention she deserved, but that just shows how strong he is, that people are now building other units similar to him in the off chance that they aren't allowed to draft him. Up next, we have Arbiter Vildred, still triple S. He's still crazy strong, even though you don't see him as much anymore. He didn't get nerfed. Well, even when he got nerfed, he actually got buffed because of Basket, but he is so ridiculous that he can skill 3 every single turn. He can get Basket every single turn. He can die, come back to life, and do his skill 3 with another Basket proc. He's so ridiculous right now that even despite the fact that we don't see him as often and there's so many counters for him, he's still used a lot. And with the meta shifting the way it did, he is back getting more use again. He died off a bit at the end of last season because things were so tanky that he wasn't really doing much. But now because things have squished up a little bit, he's back in play and seeing a ton of use. Our second last unit for today is going to be FCC. FCC, as we mentioned when we talked about Cecilia, top tier everywhere. She's one of the best defense units in the game, arguably the best. She's got shield. She's got a shield is so thick, and it's AoE. Plus, she does shield every single turn to the person with the least HP. So if you're trying to focus somebody down, it can be more annoying to kill them. Plus, she's already tanky, so that shield gets even thicker. Plus the Knight artifacts. I mean, plus skill prevent with skill 3, provoke with skill 1. It's just her kit is overloaded. Best defense unit in the game. Plus top tier in RTA. Even though she took a hit from the new frenzy changes, she's still top tier in RTA, and she's still picked almost every single fight. the fact that she took a hit and is still triple S shows just how strong she is. And finally, we have Apocalypse Ravi, arguably the best RTA unit in the game. You don't see her all that often. People love to argue with me about this one, but has the best revive in the game. She's the only unit that can revive into an instant turn. Plus, they get skill prevent, which protects them. So I think she has the best revive in the game. Plus, she's a damage dealer that can one shot anybody. She can self sustain. I mean, you name it, this girl does it. She can basically solo anybody. Her and Tywin are the two units that can solo almost any team in the game. She's very, very scary. She doesn't get as much play on global server as she does in Korea server and Asia server, but she's all over the place in Korea and Asia server, and she's all over the place in RTA for those players as well. So that's going to wrap things up for this tier list. Let me switch back here. That's going to be it for today's tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a really long video. I hope you like the changes I made to the first quarter 2021 tier list. If you guys have any suggestions, make sure you leave them down in the comment section down below. We did make changes in terms of adding the 3 stars. I didn't add them all, and I understand that, but anybody I didn't add would have been in that part at the beginning that we kind of skipped through. So basically just not worth building anyway. I tried to add only the ones that were worth building. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've gotten quite a few subscribers recently, so I'd like to really keep that up. I hope everybody has a great day, and we will see you all tomorrow for the Morty testing on stream. Don't forget to join us. It'll be twitch.tv/5fingershuffle. The link will be in the description below, and we'll see you all then. Bye for now, guys, and have a great day.